Hey, hello everyone. It's Zara Alt here. This is the Midweek Zap, and I'm very excited today to be joining Anton Krutz in his workshop, and we're going to be talking about craftsmanship, excellence, music, and a little bit about entrepreneurship. So, Anton, welcome. Tell people a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm what's called a master luthier, which is just a fancy way of saying I've been making instruments for a long time. I started making instruments and apprenticing with a violin maker from the time I was 12 years old, and after high school, I realized that's what I wanted to do. And there's actually a 4-year trade school for violin makers that I went to, so that's like a bachelor's degree. Then I went to New York to restore very fine Italian instruments, multi-million-dollar instruments for several years. So that's in essence like a master's degree, and then came back where I am now in Kansas City in 1992, and we opened up a violin shop called KC Strings, and have been making a Krutz line of instruments under my last name, Anton Krutz, for the last nearly 25 years. And so here I'm going to start off with do something. I do a quick 5-minute violin where I go through and show how an instrument is made from start to finish, because otherwise people think it just pops out of a machine somewhere, but it does not. So if we start off with a piece of wood, this is grown, the wood is grown really in mountains because the tree grown in a mountain is much, much more dense than a tree grown at sea level. And you have to cut it down in the middle of the winter. That's when all the leaves are down, when all the sap is down. So basically, in 2 meters of snow, you have to go into the mountains, cut down the tree. Then we have to dry it for 10 years, and then cut it up and use it for a violin. So if you imagine this is the center of the tree, this is the outside of the tree, and the wood comes out in quarter sawn billets like that. You could even see here where the outline is drawn out on there. And then out of that, with finger planes, we carve out a plate like this. And so this you can see is the shape of a plate. And on the inside, it's graduated. And we have thicknesses. And it's thickest right in the middle and thinnest right there on the end. So basically, this is like a bell, which is thicker on top and thinner at the bottom, but in the shape of a violin. So each plate is like a bell, but in the shape of a violin. Then you have what we call an instrument in white, and I have an instrument here with the top off. So here's the top, and then the inside you can see there's ribs, which are 6 ribs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then linings and blocks, and then the scroll is glued right into it. And scrolls basically start out with a block of wood, and everything is carved out so that you don't want. So it's basically like Michelangelo said, you just take away what you don't want, and you have the marble statue or the scroll. And here's the inside of a violin. I always tell people we never damage an instrument on purpose. We have in our shop thousands and thousands of rentals, and sure enough, some get damaged. Parents run over them. Lots of things happen. So the ones we can save, we use for science. And so on one side, we have what's called a bass bar, and on the other side, we have what's called a sound post. And what happens when, I'll show you the violin where the strings are plucked, sound goes through this a little piece of wood called the bridge, and it goes onto the top, okay? And then that bridge pushes on one side, and like a seesaw, this bass bar goes down, then pushes back up. And then that bridge then pushes on the other side, and then that pushes on the sound post, and the sound post pushes on this back. And the back acts like a trampoline, pumping up and down. And so what happens is, as it's pumping up and down, all this air is being sucked into these little openings called the F-holes, and then pushed back out. And the uniqueness about the instrument is that when all this air is pushed out of these little openings, it's just like a water hose. When you turn it on and you put your thumb on top of it, the water shoots out with a lot of power. So there's a lot of power shooting out of these little F-holes. So that's why this little violin is more powerful than a guitar, because of this little post, which actually gets the back involved in pumping up and down. And so we have a lot of videos on kcstrings.com that you can go see, how instruments are made. Also, go to our website where the other videos on crudestrings.com that are strictly about the instruments themselves. But that's pretty much our little 5-minute violin, and open it up to any questions about our field. If anybody has any questions on repair, making, restoration, varnish, there's a lot of folklore in our field, because my first teacher said there's probably more written about the violin than anything else other than the Bible. And at first I thought that that was really a grandiose statement. But then you think about it, and everything has its day in the sun. But then, the horse and buggy goes out of style, and then, the Model T goes out of style, and then the next cell phone's going to go out of style. But then something has been written about the violin for over 400 years, whether it's composition or about how it's made or anything else. So there really is a lot of information because it's continuous, and this instrument is, and the whole bowed instrument field is really a unique field that has a lot of information about it, and a lot of folklore has developed as well as a lot of secrets. So happy to answer questions about that.
I love the 5-minute violin presentation. It's just a summary. It's such a great summary. It's like the violin abstract. So,
right.
And you might want to mention, or I'm going to mention that, the wood for the bridge is a completely different type of wood than the wood for the body of the violin. It's much softer. It's just the opposite of the hard wood that goes in. I didn't know that the wood dries for 10 years before it's used.
Yes.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. I always joke that it's kind of like a box of chocolates, because after you cut down the wood, you don't know what's on the inside. And then after you dry it for 10 years, then you start working on it, and there may be a sap pocket or not, or something that it makes it unusable. So you have literally sometimes for a base $1,000 piece of wood that is unusable once you start trying to work on it. So it's but it has to dry in thick form until it's usable. So really don't know what's on the inside. A lot of risk.
So do you buy by piece, or do you buy, I'm going to make 20 violins and 20 pieces of wood, or how does that process work?
Well, we do two ways. One, we actually go into the mountains, and I've done that. Go into the mountains, try to find the wood, cut it down, dry, put it in billets, bring it back to our shop and dry it. And other times there are merchants that actually go get what we call tone woods, and they have a relationship with mills, because again, these mills are way up in the mountains, really difficult to start relationships with them. And so you have these merchants that have relationship with these mills, and they buy the certain wood, and once they cut it up and they know this is a good piece of wood, they would send me a sample, and I go, I like this, send me the entire tree. So they'd send me the entire tree sample of already cut up, and obviously I'm paying much more for it, but that's because they've taken the risk and the time and of finding the tree, because it is much easier to work through them, because when you go into the mountains, you really have to deal with sawmills, and they don't know you, and out of 200 logs, you might want one, and you're going in and you're picky and you want one, and they want to be selling by bulk. And all of a sudden, some guy comes out of nowhere and wants to buy one tree out of 200, and they got to pull it out. And anyway, they really don't like violin makers. So once they have an established relationship with somebody that they know, they'll pull logs aside that those people are looking for. So it's easier to buy through the merchants that already have a relationship with the mills. So it's our own little inside business model.
And once you start in on a piece of wood, how long does it take until there's a finished violin at the other end of the process?
Usually about 600 hours. We always say that. So it's pretty long.
That is very long. 600 hours.
Yeah.
That's a long time. There's a lot of detail work.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a lot of detail work. And then something people who are on the show might want to know is, you have your studio there, and I just found out in the green room that you also have another studio. And so I'm wondering, how many people go into the production of your instruments? And you know what? We didn't tell people that it isn't just violins. You want to go through your range?
Yeah, the whole line.
So we have violin, viola, cello, and bass. Do you make any Renaissance instruments by special?
No. We made one a long time ago. That was it. But otherwise, it's just the bow.
Those instruments. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was curious, and then we have a question from Bob Strassel. Hi, Bob. I'm so glad you made it. His question is, how do you compare the current violin making to violin making in the 17th century? Has technology improved the sound? How difficult is it to recreate the sound of a Stradivarius? That's his question, and I'd ask one more. Is that the sound that you would want to recreate? So.
Sure. In many ways, the technology is the same. Sasha, can you get me plane and knife and some wood? So I'll show you the finger planes, knives, chisels are all the same as they were. Obviously, a little better design, but conceptually very very some wood spruce. So conceptually, very much the same. Obviously, you have band saws and table saws, but here we have like a so it's a little bit of finger plane, and here you have a knife. I don't know if you can see that, just a knife. So same type of knife. So the idea is that a lot of the tools are the same. And when I went to violin making school, actually, the first 3 instruments they made you make completely by hand. So couldn't use no machinery whatsoever. So you had to use coping saws and knives and everything completely by hand, because they wanted to make you suffer just like the violin makers suffered 400 years ago. So you knew before you could use any machinery. And obviously it took a lot longer. But the bandsaw doesn't make the instrument by itself. It's just a tool. It's just a faster tool than you would with a hand. And what makes an instrument really is not even the workmanship. It's the varnish that goes on top of it. That's the secret of Stradivarius and the Italian instruments. So you could have 2 instruments, what we call in the white. So no exact identical twins in every way. The wood's identical. Everything's identical about them. And the varnish, if you put a student factory finish on one, it's going to have a $500 sound, and if you put a Stradivari finish on another one, it's going to have a $5 million sound. So the change happens with the finish that goes on top of the wood, and that gives the instrument a voice quality. So, for instance, our Krutz instruments our byline is creating the voice of strings, because a voice takes 3 divine elements of heat, moisture, and air in order to exist. Very few elements on Earth take 3 elements to exist, and a voice takes that. And an instrument is a wooden box with a metal string, but when you hear the finest Italian instruments being played, you hear a voice quality. So you have a wooden box with metal strings evoking a voice. So the concepts of that's what the voice quality happens when the correct finish goes on top of the wood. So the long answer to the short question, can you reproduce a Stradivari? I said, well, we feel we do with our instruments, because the finish on them reproduces that same quality of voice that was found on the Cremonese master quality instruments, because it's not the workmanship, and sometimes the wood they used looked like it came out of a fence post. Very, very poor quality wood. But they all had in Italy an Italian sound, and especially in the town of Cremona had the Cremonese sound, which all had to do with that finish.
And how long did it take you to come up with the Krutz finish?
Well, that I experimented for literally 15 years, blew holes in walls, lit my leg on fire, had a lot of experimentation, read every book, tried everything to find out it didn't work, sort of like the Thomas Edison line when he tried 10,000 light bulbs, and he said, well, I didn't fail 10,000 times, I found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. So I have the same story where I found 10,000 ways not to make a finish that works, because not only do you have to reproduce what they did, but then you have to find equivalent ingredients and chemicals and solutions to equal what they had. So because they made things completely in a different way then, and they used completely different resins and that you can't even get now. So you can't even if you found Stradivari's recipe, you can't do it because those elements do not exist. So you have to find what they did, then experiment and combine other modern ingredients in order to achieve the same result. Because in the end, it's the end result that counts. and so that's what took a really long time. So found a lot of things that didn't work.
So do you think, I'm just curious about this because do you think that doing the restoration process and having to work, because sometimes, varnish gets scratched and
Right.
that's part of what you have to do, was key in helping you go on that exploratory path?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. That's one of the aspects that helped, not to tell me what needed to be done, but to tell me when I did something that it wasn't right, because I knew what the finish looked like, I knew what the sound sounded like, and so when you know the end result and you don't achieve the same result, then I have not completed my experimentation. So in essence, that was the guidepost, and even though ironically the guidepost was set several centuries ago, that was it. And without having to work on these these instruments, without having to see them, without having to listen to them, there is no way to understand where that guidepost is. And so people thinking, oh, I'll just make a violin, until you go through the entire process of going to work for the best shops in the world and seeing the best instruments and working on them, then you can't have an understanding of what it takes to make it, because you don't have a guidepost. And I always say, there's no way to score if you don't know where the goal is. You gotta know where the goal is to run with the football. Otherwise, you're just running around the field. And so having that experience was absolutely crucial in understanding, there's my goal. How am I going to get there? And so that's where 15 years of experimentation, of really nonstop, and actually that is how, as a business, we grew and developed our own lines, is because I realized, okay, it doesn't make sense for me to just make my own instruments and then have them have mediocre sound. So I started making mid-grade instruments and ordering less expensive instruments from Romania that I would varnish and finish, because I knew that was the most important aspect to the sound. And so in essence, did a lot of experimentation because I was able to make a lot of instruments that way. But then I had a lot of those midline instruments to sell and sold a lot of those instruments. So that's how we started off the business, having not only top line instruments but midline instruments as well. And of course those instruments were the best in the world, because even though I didn't reach my final goal in the ideal varnish at that time, I still had better instruments at that price range than anybody else. And so really that's how our business model got started, is having the two lines of instruments, and then later on we got in the student line as well. So and now we have the vertical line of instruments, Krutz line of instruments.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I just know I've tried doing restoration on icons, and it's much more complicated than you think, for the same reason, because the Olifa has to match it.
Yeah. The training's really crucial for that, for all kind of craft.
And it sits out not 10 years, but it sits out for 6 months. So yeah, it's the same thing. That is just great. It's really admirable, Anton. I love experimentation, and I can tell that you do too.
Right.
Because you would never be where you are right now if you hadn't just done those 10,000 combinations and look for the right thing. That was a great question, Bob. Thanks so much. Started a really great discussion, and then we have another question, and I know you want to talk about this. So this is from Midweek in Great Britain. He says, has Anton Krutz explored the spiritual side of music?
Right. That's an important thing. So the spiritual side is that the string part of string instruments is the same as what the quantum core of all matter is, because it's a string. So in the string theory, at the heart of all matter is string. And so you're vibrating inside, and you could feel that when you have emotions. And imagine emotions as being the ocean and feelings as being sea level. So you really don't know what's happening inside the ocean until you see the sea level, and same thing with emotion. So you have this emotion, and then the feelings is what starts telling you what's happening. And so when you hear violin and you hear bowed strings in general, the string vibrating, you're hearing and vibrating to that in consonance with with that's resonance. So your body's vibrating to that, and so that's what causes emotion. And so when you go to movies, if you take out the soundtrack, the string soundtrack, be it Jaws or Star Wars or Gone with the Wind, in Gone with the Wind you just have people kissing. Jaws you just have fish swimming around. Star Wars you just have lights and some talking. The strings in the end, that's what causes emotion, and in the string soundtrack. And so that has an effect on the emotion, and that's why it has been around for 400 years, because it's not you can't duplicate that with a synthesizer, because there is a vibrational concept and property to the bowed string that you can't have duplicated in a synthesizer. So that's that has a lot to do with it, and of course, emotion has a lot to do with spirituality, obviously, because you can't logically pray, you can't logically do a lot of things that are spiritual. So you have to have an emotional backdrop to it. So there's a definitive connection to that.
That was a great explanation, and I was when I was in the San Diego filmmakers, we had someone who puts together the music. She was a composer, and going through a sequence of film without the music and with the music, and what a difference that makes. So I really, your explanation made a lot of sense to me. But it's the, when you're playing the violin, you can see it's right there by your face, Sure. You can see the strings vibrating.
Right.
Feel it. I like that, and I like also the comparison to the synthesizer, and why that's not the same thing, and
right.
Also why going to a live performance is so emotional. It's just so much more resonating inside of you, right, than even a very excellent recording.
Right.
Yeah, I apologize for the kitty tail. Tidy two-tone, upstaging everyone. Anyway, the there's something about that is it does resonate inside of you.
Yeah, here I'll play 2 notes so people can hear. It's not going to come across great, but so this is my violin, so maybe people can hear it. It's a So what I do for people is I sing. So for instance, remember how we said the voice? So you have moisture, heat, and air in the voice, and here's the violin, which has the string in a wooden box. So if you play an open string, which is the most metallic sound possible, because when you do vibrato, it helps smooth the sound. But if I'm singing and I'm playing an open string, then theoretically you should always hear the difference. But if you can't, that's when the violin is singing, and this is an open string. So we go. So if you miss where my violin is playing and where I'm singing, this violin is singing, and that's the quality of the varnish, turning this instrument into the same concept that you have on a Stradivari, where the violin is singing. And of course, as soon as you start vibratoing and with fingers, it starts even being even closer to a voice. But that in the end is really the concept of a great sound, and that's what drives emotion the most. So a lot of people, when they're thinking about violins, if they hear kids playing on student instruments and they don't have the voice, they think, oh, well, that's not emotional. But the great instruments really do come close to that voice quality, which then becomes a lot more emotionally impactful.
That's very, very impactful. Yeah, that's the word, you know. It is. It is. And then Midweek has another comment here. This is a longer one. Sound has properties that cannot be, quote, measured using physical instruments. In traditional Indian classical music and even Western classical music, spirituality plays a major role. As against this, pop music is more of physical and non-spiritual.
Right. Well, I, I think the pop music also has emotional impact, but I think it's different levels of impact. I think people, you can't throw music in a generic sense, just like you can't throw emotion in a generic sense. Emotion, you have an incredible diaspora of emotion. You have everything from the type of hate that that can annihilate whole nations of people, to the type of love that wants to make you sacrifice yourself for whole nations of people. So you have an emotional diaspora that's really wide, and so you have musical diaspora that's really wide too. And the bowed string music affects a type of emotion, I think, that is that is a healthy one, and more connected to love, to kindness, to empathy, to compassion, and also to innovation. It's not an accident that the Renaissance in Europe happened right after the bowed string instrument came into being, as it was. So because at that time you all of a sudden had bowed string instruments playing across in concert halls, and literally right afterwards you had the Renaissance happen. So because at that time that was the first time the common person ever heard music outside of a lute or something, a simple wooden instrument, and all of a sudden they heard bowed string music like they've never heard before, and it was a huge emotional impact, which again has an effect on on innovation. So there's spirituality and innovation, breakthrough innovation. All of it is interconnected. As I always say, it's not an accident that Einstein was a violinist, and he said he saw his life through music, and everything that he came up with, he says he understood through music, and then juxtaposed that onto math. So that's what bowed string music has, and that's why it's always going to be relevant, because it's connected to to those kind of neural aspects.
I'm letting that roll around in my head. I really like it. I really like it a lot. And so, audience people, Omi, I see you there. If you have any questions for Anton, post them in the comment stream. And we had a conversation the other day about double stops. You want to talk about that and give us a demonstration? That would be really super.
Well, first, I'm not a musician. I play. Well, I do. I play enough to know the type of instruments I'm making, so I'm not ever going to make the best sound again. So when I'm playing, it's just simply I really actually just play really hard on a violin in order to hear its full potential, because it's but this is the double stops, which actually really make the violin work, and so you could hear what its full potential is. So I just really play hard on a violin, because then you could hear how it's vibrating with power. Because if you play nice and easy, it's sort of like I make the analogy to cars. A Ford and a Ferrari at 5 miles an hour going around cones, they'll both look kind of the same. But at 55 miles an hour, the Ford Tempo flies off its wheels, and the Ferrari is still hugging the cones. And so that's what happens when you push a really great instrument. It's still hugging the cones. It's still hugging each individual note, while a not so good instrument cannot hold up. So when I play, it's really just with a lot of intensity and power.
Okay, thank you. We're getting some feedback here, Anton. First, Bob has quick response, neural aspects. Wow. And then also he has a question for you. He says, can you remember one specific instrument that you created that made you say, wow, I can't believe the sound in that or the beauty in that?
Yeah, there's been quite a few. Sometimes you make instruments and they're good and some are a little better, some a little worse. You make it, but then sometimes there's randomness within the world. People say there's chance, but as Einstein said, God does not play dice. You know, so I don't believe it's chance. I believe it's randomness that's designed, and so sometimes you have randomness where the right woods come together, the exact right thicknesses came together, the varnish ingredients really came together, and that randomness produces an instrument that just goes over the line of being really, really good to just being fantastic, and those instruments just sell immediately. And it happens. There's just you have one out of every 15, 20 that just has it. Now only the best professional would hear it, right? So it's just one of those things that the best professional then hooks up with that violin because they could hear it, or viola or cello, and it sells. So it does happen, but it's professionalism keeps things really on a more or less consistent basis. Another analogy I use is sort of like the Olympics, where in the Olympics, everyone in the Olympics, they're no schmuck. They're all like the best in the world, but then the gold medal winner is a tenth of a second faster than last place finish, but that's everything. And so that's what happens sometimes with an instrument or two. They just get that tenth of a second, better, and they really do have a really amazing sound.
And then Deborah Rock has a comment. She said, whoops. She says, our William Waugh, that's her husband, daughter loves playing the violin. It relaxes her, and it is truly amazing what music can do to the human soul.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true, Deborah.
Yeah, totally agree. We did have an adult pediatric dentist, and of course they go through a lot of stress, kids and dentistry, not a good combination. And he said, I either have to go see a shrink or play on an instrument. And he bought one of my top line, $20,000 cellos, and he could afford it. So who am I to stop him, right? But he said that's what he needed, every night. And he doesn't play well, but he just plays enough, and that's his relaxation. It's not TV, it's not reading, it's not thinking, it's just playing. And he could hear the difference between the student instrument sound and the top sound, and every note he played, he wanted that sound because it really soothed him and it calmed him. And so that's musical therapy for a lot of adults. Start playing. Yeah.
That's playing music. Playing music does something for your soul, as Deborah and Midweek have both said today, and I know that's true for me. That playing is this space that resonates. I don't know how to explain it, and you would do a better job than I would. But I'll never forget, long ago, many years ago, I went to a concert. I went to hear Utah Phillips sing and play, and he came in and he sat down and he said, "Why are you here? Why aren't you home making music?" And I just love that. It's like that personal interaction between you and the music that you are creating is the power.
Right.
Yeah.
Really agree.
And Bob Strassel, he's got to hear this, Anton. And I think Anton Krutz is the Feynman of violin making. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and thoughts.
Yeah, that's Richard Feynman is one of the greatest modern physicists in modern times. So I appreciate that.
So thank you. So I know we were going to spend a little time at the end here today, since I don't see any questions popping up at the moment, talking about being an entrepreneur, and you tell your story of how you kind of came in through the back door of being an entrepreneur.
Right. I always thought that we would start a boutique shop, which is in the business world, that's what we call some craftsman that goes in and starts a business. And most violin shops are boutique shops. There's the violin maker, the violin repair person. They have a few people working, and then they have a shop. They repair. They sell some strings, and I thought that's what we do. And we started making instruments, and then started making basses, and people liked them. And then my experimentation got a midline of instruments which people like, and more customers came, and more customers came. And luckily for me, the brand was developed for me through our work before I even understood what brand was. And so now I realized my clients always understood my brand before I understood my brand. And so 15 years later, we had 15 people working for us, and payroll, and I had no idea why we had less money here and more money here, and that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I'm in business. I had no idea I was going into business. And so at this point, KC Strings is one of the largest violin shops in the country. We have a whole line of instruments, Krutz Instruments, and they're separated into its own company, KrutzStrings.com, which are sold all over the country, all over the world, really. And KC Strings is the flagship store for the Krutz Instruments. But all these things happened as a process, after 15 years of being in business, realizing that I was actually in business, and I actually had to start taking actions that were business actions as much as just craft actions. And so this is a part of my entrepreneurial path, where others start out saying, I'm going into business and here's my business plan. I had no idea I was going into business. So I had a very big shock in the middle of my career, realizing I had a second career that I had to understand, and it was quite a bit different than what I was doing up to that point. So
how do you balance your time in that regard between the craftsmanship and always developing that, and all the experimentation that you do, and the actual running of the business? Do you have a way that you balance your time? How do you know it's
yeah, it's called one word. It's called delegate. And one thing I understood, leadership is not being in front. It's not being in back. It's achieving results. So the greatest leader is not the one that can lead people per se. It's the one that can achieve results. And the way you do that in any business is you have to know and understand how to delegate. Therefore, you need to understand what the strengths and weaknesses of the people are that are working with you in the team. And so that is part of the growing process of understanding people and understanding their strengths and working with them. And through that, right now, only half my time is really spent on the craft. The other half is spent on the business of really delegating, because we have accountants and bookkeepers, and we have also the people that are in our retail staff, and are all wonderful, and the craftsmen, and then we have sales, and so we have all these people part of a larger business. And so I work with them, and my goal is that in time, the team will be so strong that I could actually go back to doing 90% craftsmanship, and then the 10% overlooking the team that runs the business. But at this point, in order to develop the right team, which is still ongoing, I'm spending over half my time with the team developing that in the business.
Okay, and then somewhere along the way you expanded to have two shops. How did that come about?
not understanding what we were doing. Before I understood we were in business, in St. Louis, there came an opportunity to get a shop, and I thought, oh well, we'll just put somebody down there and they'll sell instruments, right? It was no thought in, well, how do you run it? How do you manage it? How do you operate it? It was a matter of, oh well, there's an opportunity, let's take it. And when we were first in business, I said yes to everything because I thought, well, and if an opportunity comes up, then you need to say yes. And now we realize part of being a business is knowing when to say no to things as well, because focus is really important. Without focus and understanding, again, where the goal is and what you're trying to achieve, then you end up really running around the field without getting to your goal. So, but the shop there is wonderful now, and it's great. So we love it, but we just didn't didn't know that really having multiple business models is something of a different it's a different model than just having one store. So
yeah. You're
so
also
and we love where everything is at and all the shops, because we do all these different things, and I love it. But I just didn't realize we were getting into all different business models when we started doing it. Yeah.
okay. And now I have to thank Bob Stossel because he wrote it out for everyone, and that is a great quote. Wait, let me freeze this frame here. That's a great quote. Leadership is not being in front, it's not being in back, it's achieving results. Thank you, Bob. I know it's a fabulous quote.
Yep. That's really what it is. Yeah, you have to achieve results, otherwise, it's not leadership.
The shorter version. You have to achieve results, otherwise it's not leadership. That's it. And wait, I just saw another question from someone. Oh, here's the expansion of that thought from Midweek. Leader is one who brings the best in everybody. Boss, and hence undesirable, is the one who is concerned about his/her position and demands but never acknowledges the good work done by the subordinate.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Anton, I want to thank you so much. This has just been totally amazing. It's just amazing. Everything you are so expansive in your thought and so experimental in your doing and so goal-oriented in your results and your quest for excellence in what you produce, all wrapped up in one person. It's really quite an honor to have a conversation with you. So I want to thank you. Thank you. Do you have any last words for our audience?
Visit our website, just a shameless plug, kcstrings.com or krutstrings.com if you want to see videos on how we make instruments and on how we repair instruments. We have a lot of videos that you can't find anywhere else in the world about our field, and we're happy to share and happy to for you to contact us and answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so very much. And I also want to thank William Rock, who's been, lurking in the background with his microphone off, who originally suggested this show, and it's just been fabulous. So thank you, William. Thank you for the idea, and thank you for being here today. And next month, we're going to be talking with the Wild Stallions of Search Engine Optimization, Ammon Johns and Bill Slawski. So that should be pretty phenomenal on a completely different level. Anyway, once again, Anton Krutz, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Zapsters, for being here and all your questions and comments. And we'll see you next time. Ciao.
Ciao.